So the education and health sectors have been flagged by Statistics South Africa as culprits when it comes to the highest annual price changes. High schools recorded the most increase in 2024, followed by primary schools and tertiary institutions, while the average price of healthcare insurance increased by 12.9% in 2024. Let's now unpack this with the Chief Economist at the Minerals Council of South Africa, Hugo. Pienaar, Hugo, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Let's start with health insurance, medical aid. Geez, 12.9% is higher than the average CPI, even over the past couple of years. Why do you believe we're seeing this type of increase, a double-digit increase at that?
Yeah, so once a year, and I'm sure viewers would be well aware of this, but once a year, the medical providers, the big companies, Discovery, Momentum, and the like, they of course increase their tariffs or the monthly contributions that we need to make. So that normally comes in January, and Stats SA then surveys those increases in February of each month. And we know some of these increases have been quite steep, and I guess it's sort of still a function of the high generalized inflation we've had coming out of COVID. So I think we must just bear in mind that during the peak of COVID, some of these insurance companies actually kept their increases quite at bay, or they postponed their increases. So this was in 2021, also in 2022. So I guess we're now seeing a bit of catch-up from those companies to sort of recoup some of that, I don't want to say funds that they gave back to us, but the fact that they kept their increases actually below inflation for the last couple of years. Now we're seeing a bit of a recouping of that.
Yeah, so this means that what the companies, the medical aid insurance companies are trying to do here is to recover the money that they could have lost or lost out during the during the height of COVID-19 when they didn't increase as much the medical aid insurance premiums.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the story. But exactly. And of course, they still sat with high input costs during those years. So yes, I think that broadly is the story here.
Yeah. Do we in South Africa have any regulation perhaps around the amount by which medical aid companies can increase their premiums by? Or is that only the company's decision and based on the contributors of the company and final decision taken by them? And there's no oversight body that would say that, hey, listen, you can't increase your prices by double digits considering the economic state that the country finds itself in and also looking at those CPI figures.
There is a body, I forgot the name, who provides guidelines. So once a year they would publish guidelines and sort of say, look, they recommend that the companies increase by 6 or 7%. But that is just the guideline. It then is the prerogative at the end of the day of the individual companies to look at their balance sheets and, as you say, the amount of members, etc., to then decide what the final increase is.
Yeah. I wonder then, Hugo, before we move over to the other category on education, that when you look at this particular increase, 12.9%, which is essentially close to 13%, if this bolsters the argument of some people who are proponents of the NHI to say, let rather the state be in charge of dispersing funds when it comes to the healthcare sector?
So Aldrin, we must be very careful here because at the end of the day, there are no free lunches. I mean, NHI, if you do it implement it to its fullest, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of billions of rands that this is going to cost the state. And who's going to finance that? I mean, at the end of the day, we're probably going to have to increase personal income taxes and other taxes, perhaps even the value-added tax rate to finance that. So at the end of the day, consumers are going to pay for national health insurance in some shape or form.
Okay. Then let's look at education as well. We've seen an increase in education as well, just above 6%. What do you think the contributing factors here could be?
So once again, the schools, primary, secondary, and also the tertiary institutions, they increase their premiums once a year. Again, this happens early in the year. So Stats SA then does, whereas for many categories in the CPI basket, those categories are surveyed every single month. So most of the food items, for example, the petrol increases will be surveyed every single month. But something like education, Stats SA has an annual survey. So they only look at those prices once a year, and that indeed is in March of each year. So that increase that we're seeing reflected in the March CPI is simply that those annual increases from the education sector now coming through. So in broad terms, the overall education category increased by 6.5% month on month in March. Now, if one thinks that overall inflation last year was 6%, this is somewhat above the general inflation rate, but ordinarily those education price increases are broadly in line with what we see in terms of overall inflation in South Africa. So roughly around the 6% mark.
Yeah. Let's look at the boarding for universities. University boarding averaging at around 8.2%, more expensive, of course, than a year ago. And I wonder what the contributing factors to this could be. I have a hypothesis, and I would like to hear your views on this, Hugo. Could this particular increase also be driven by NSFAS and looking at property developers and property managers who know that there is a cohort of university students that will be coming in every year, and they know that NSFAS will be paying the boarding costs for those students, the majority of them who applied through NSFAS, and therefore we see an increase in the price of boarding in general.
So, Aldrin, I would not want to speak on behalf of the universities. I mean, I'm not as close to this, but I think certainly there has been a lot of pressure on accommodation on campuses, and I think many universities are probably having to to build more to increase the I was going to say the residential space on campuses. And of course, that construction is quite costly. So yes, it may well be a link to that, but I can't say for sure. I think we're sort of speculating here.
Okay. No, Hugo, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. But just a quick one on the price of fuel. Also, we see that there's an increase there. Generally, slowed down when it comes to CPI. What should we be expecting from the Reserve Bank when the Reserve Bank gets to meet, the MPC gets to meet again and look at these figures?
Yeah, so I think the numbers in a general sense, sort of between 5 and 5% on headline CPI is more or less what the Reserve Bank has been expecting. But importantly, these numbers remain quite a bit higher than where the Reserve Bank wants inflation to be settling, which is around 4.5%. So I think the Reserve Bank is going to meet in May, again, literally the day before we go to the polls, or during that week that we go to the polls. So I can't see them doing anything else but keeping the policy interest rate unchanged at the next meeting in May, and probably also in the July meeting, as they first want to see more progress on moving towards that 4.5% rate. And also their forecast, how much confidence do they have that in 12 months' time we will get to 4.5%?
Thank you so much for your time. Hugo Pienaar, Chief Economist at the Mineral Council of South Africa. And remember also the IMF also saying that they expect the major central banks from after mid this year to start reducing their interest rates. So maybe South Africa will be following suit as well. Still to